The Merildon Farm in Alstonville, New South Wales, owned by Rick Payne, has achieved an annual average of 4.6 tonnes per hectare of nut and shell since benchmarking began in 2009. At an average saleable kernel recovery of 36%, this equates to 1.5 tonnes of saleable kernel per hectare. This high average productivity puts the farm, which is managed by Rick Payne and also Bill Johnston, firmly among the top performing farms in the benchmarking study. Like many growers, Rick and Bill face challenges of maintaining ground cover, effective spray coverage and productive wood as the trees have grown to around 13 metres. Extensive damage caused by an East Coast low in 2009 provided an unexpected opportunity to see how tall trees respond to significant height reduction.
So in 2009 we got an East Coast low. The farm received extensive damage and there were limbs down all over the place. I picked two particular pair of trees up in the Hawaiian block. I cut all the damage out and cut those trees back to 4 metres high. Over the years I'd kept an eye on those trees, and I'd noticed the production came back very strongly within 3 years. So that set the mindset of changing our strategy on how we're going to control tree height in the orchard, and now we've gone back to a strategy of reducing the tree height to 4 metres in alternate pairs.
Preparation and timing are important elements of the tree height reduction strategy.
So the preparation to start this strategy, we generally compost the trees the year before at roughly 300 litres a tree, just to build the tree health up before we start such major work. And then aim to do the work between July and August, just so it doesn't inhibit the next season's flowering. And also, if you do this work later, you've got a chance of sunburn within the tree.
Rick and Bill use pole saws at ground level to cut trees in alternate pairs to a height of 4 metres. This is done in a diamond pattern within the block to create pockets of light.
So the strategy of picking the right trees all came about by the way we'd structured our drains. We wanted a diamond pattern of alternate pairs so we could get 360-degree light onto the orchard floor and through and around the remaining trees.
Nurse limbs are retained on the cut trees to aid their recovery, while cut limbs are removed and chipped to create mulch. Some of this is composted and returned to the orchard as valuable organic matter, while surplus chip is sold to offset costs.
So the strategy is to do 10% a year, every year until we get across the farm. So roughly it'll take 10 years to do the whole farm, and then after that it's a maintenance program of just come in, taking selective limbs out from that time on, maintaining the height of about 6 metres.
With some trees reaching up to 13 metres, cutting alternate paired trees down to 4 metres creates a significant change within the orchard. So how do the trees respond following this change? Within
2 months we start getting rapid vegetative growth on all those cut points. The following year we generally go back and clean up the nurse branches that we'd left in the lower part of the tree just to get a better shape. The trees will grow rapidly back, probably 2 metres up to 6 metres high within 2 to 3 years. And then over time, what I've noticed, the tree naturally thins itself out. So we don't really need to go back in and thin those growing points up.
So what effect has this approach had on the overall productivity on this farm?
Full production generally comes back in those A varieties within 2 to 3 years. We've noticed a big gain in yield in the second season since we'd done the work in the A varieties. The Hawaiian varieties were generally taking 3 to 4 years. Most of the yield in those years is right in underneath the canopy where it's really dark, really dense. So that sort of tells me that young vigour in the wood seems to be the dominant player in yield there, not light inception. I would say that the trees we've left at the 13 metres have compensated the trees that have been cut because they're getting a lot more light inception, better spray coverage, better airflow. 4 years after we started doing this work, we've noticed that the production within those blocks have increased up to 20-30%. Apart from that, we've reinvigorated the trees, so we're getting more productive wood back into the trees. We've re-established all our ground cover, and we're getting a lot better spray coverage throughout the orchard.
So what time and cost was involved in reducing the height of trees?
So the total time it took to do the 350 trees that we choose to do every year is roughly 10 to 12 days to cut them, drag them out, have them chipped and stockpile all the wood chip. So if you look at the cost per tree, the pole sawing was roughly $7 a tree. The chipping was roughly $23, $24 a tree, and the time-consuming part of the job, dragging the trees out, was roughly $7 a tree. And so the overall cost of those 350 trees, chipped, stockpiled, is roughly $12,000 to $12,500.
Chipping and stockpiling of limbs has actually helped reduce the cost of the height reduction work.
So the benefit of stockpiling wood chip is of that 350 trees, we were able to generate 700 cubic metres of wood chip. Of that, we keep 300 for our composting program, and then the other 400 of surplus we've managed to sell at $12 a cubic metre to local farms. So when you look at the total costs of doing the program, we regained roughly $5,000 worth of wood chip in sales. So that $12,000 virtually came back to nearly $7,000. And of that, the 300 cubic metres that we kept, the net value to buy in is roughly $18 to $20 a cubic metre. So that's another, if you look at it that way, it's another saving of roughly $5,000. If you take all those factors into consideration, the net cost to do that program was roughly $2,500.
As with most management systems, there are some issues to be mindful of with this approach.
The pole sawing work needs two skilled operators. We can't just have people cutting limbs random or not doing the right job. And another issue is the slow time it takes to drag the limbs out to be chipped. What we found down the track a year later, with all that rapid growth on those cut sites, they create a great area for rats' nests, so rats are an issue and we've got to keep controlling them.
So in summary, there are important points to consider when undertaking a canopy height reduction program. Compost trees prior to cutting. Use skilled labour for cutting limbs and always leave nurse limbs. Aim to undertake the work in July and August to avoid sunburn and the impact on the next season's flowering. Do the work in stages across your farm to maintain yield.
So my best advice to growers is to start early. Trees between 12 and 15 years old. If you start doing the tree height reduction at that stage, the costs are going to come right back down.